All right, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Again, my name is Kimna Miller, and my Sport Around the World international event is going to be the Rugby World Cup. So, the history, the origin, when it first happened, we have a bunch of different information here, and I'm just going to rattle it all off. So, before the cup was even approved, efforts were most notably made by an Australian and a New Zealander, which is why the first cup was co-hosted by Australia and New Zealand in 1987. And again, their efforts were approved by the International Rugby Football Board, which is the IRFB, in 1985, and then obviously 2 years later was the first game. However, the cup is a very, very sought after invitation because for the very first game, only 9 out of the 16 teams were accepted to play. So New Zealand was the first team to actually win the cup, defeating France 29-9, and they won again in 2011 and 2015. South Africa soon won after that, a couple times, but a fun fact right here, if you look on the right-hand side, Nelson Mandela was the first person to present the South African team with the cup, their first win, which is, I think it's pretty cool. The governing bodies of the Rugby World Cup would be World Rugby, which is previously the International Rugby Football League, which approved the first game. They're based out of Dublin, Ireland, and they're comprised of about 120 national unions. Now, a union has about 13, a league has about 15. A union is basically like a little rugby tournament of themselves. So about 13 teams will come together, and that is one union. So frequency and location for the World Cup, much like the Olympics, the World Cup takes place every 4 years. And the hosting country will always change, and they'll alternate every 4 years between the North Hemisphere and the South Hemisphere. The most recent Rugby World Cup was held in Japan in 2019, and South Africa won that one. However, the next Rugby World Cup will actually be held September of this year in France. Size and scope. So I found this very, very interesting, but the Rugby World Cup is actually third in the largest sporting events in the world, only after the Summer Olympics and the FIFA World Cup. Now that's based off a lot of things like revenue and economic growth and participation and spectators and everything like that. But the participants in the World Cup can only come from the top 20 countries. So they're only ever going to have 20 teams in the tournament. So that, again, is why it's so sought after to be invited and get to play in it. So growth over the years, a couple different things have grown. Obviously, audience growth, so about 479 million in 2015. And then in 2019, it grew to 501 million. That's about a 5% increase. Media coverage growth from 2015 to 2019, a 26% growth in that. So they had about 857.3 million viewers in 2019. And then lastly, in their revenue growth, from 2015, there were about 228 million pounds generated for the hosting country. This most previous one in 2019, 4.3 million pounds were generated for Japan. So obviously a big, big jump in the revenue. Next, we have the participants and the spectators profile. So in the top right, you can see obviously the men's rugby team And on the bottom, you can see the women's rugby team. Now, one thing I like about the Rugby World Cup is it's gender neutral. So when they say the World Cup, there's a men and a women's team involved in that. It's not men's World Cup or women's World Cup. It's just one big World Cup tournament. Now, again, the participants of rugby, the smaller they are, the bigger in their stature. Normally, that's going to be easier because they're so low to the ground. It's a very aggressive sport. They're very agile with their bodies. And then spectators, again, they're everyone, but mostly the host country and the countries that are going to compete in the World Cup. Media coverage for the U.S., for our media coverage here, the official station is the NBC, or you can watch it with the Peacock account. However, many different channels across the world, ITV, Sky, NZ, Prime, Virgin Media. Virgin Media has the contract for this upcoming World Cup. However, one fun fact is that the Rugby World Cup actually broke the record for the highest broadcasting fees. Obviously, you could see there $230 million in broadcasting fees in 2015, and it's expected to grow 70% by the time of this next tournament from the $230 million, which is just crazy. Sponsorships. So a couple sponsorships, sorry about that. They could be tournament, team, event, products. These are just going to be for the tournament. So this is for the Rugby World Cup, not a specific team or anything like that. So you have financial services for the players, for the spectators. You have airlines, beverages, technology, financial management for the teams, and obviously security. And these are going to be for the upcoming World Cup here in September. Licensing. World Rugby announced their RPF, which is their proposal request for their global licensing for the international federation programs. Obviously, it's just going to license all the men and women's rugby property and their products and all the demand that involves the teams or the coaches or the stadiums or anything like that. They're working on licensing everything. However, the RFP is available for a global sporting license, so that's kind of making it a bit easier. Just some extra information that I thought was pretty interesting. Obviously, there's many benefits to hosting, just like any other sporting event, but 2.9 billion pounds, which translates to about $3 billion in total economic impact for the host country, and then 1.1 billion pounds, which again is about $1 billion for direct visit expenditures. So that's pretty awesome. And the U.S. is set to host the games in 2031. So if you like rugby and you want to go see something cool, I guess you could go there in 2031. Lastly, again, there's just a little marketing for the World Cup here coming up in September in France. And then these are my resources. I appreciate y'all coming on and learning about some Rugby World Cup. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day and you had fun during the presentation and learned something new.